Hello everyone, I'm Cam, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Backrooms. This is the feature-length horror debut of Kane Parsons, also known on YouTube as Kane Pixels. The story follows a furniture store owner with a troubled past as he descends into the titular backrooms, a never-ending winding maze of empty hallways and oddly placed objects. Like most Gen Zers, I've been exposed to the Backrooms online as a sort of liminal horror concept, even though I wasn't familiar with the original 4chan posts or even Kane Pixels web series. So going into Backrooms, I didn't really know what to expect, but I was mostly curious to see how Kane Parsons would adapt this very viral concept onto the big screen, and whether he'd lean into some of the more obscure art house elements of the Backrooms concept or make it more palatable for younger audiences. Because as I'm sure you know, there's the whole Roblox Backrooms stuff, levels, entities, more palatable and easier to digest horror concepts than just empty rooms that seem off. So my feelings on the movie are generally positive because the liminal horror is executed, in my opinion, very, very well. My biggest disappointments mostly stem from the writing and the fact that these liminal horror elements are somewhat sidelined as you progress into the movie. The backrooms themselves at first seem like a character in the movie that act on its own accord or bend the characters to its will, but as you progress into the movies, it feels more like set dressing to explore these characters who aren't developed particularly well beyond their past trauma. I've seen a lot of people describe this movie as being very clearly influenced by the work of David Lynch. As someone who's relatively new to the world of film, I have to be honest, we all have our blind spots, and mine is David Lynch. I am not familiar with David Lynch's works. I haven't even seen Twin Peaks, but I've seen the phrase Lynchian thrown around so much, referring to movies that have a very dreamlike, quirky, almost nonsensical feeling, that I am familiar with what Lynchian implies. And I would agree that, yes, even though I haven't seen any David Lynch films, this kind of does have a Lynchian vibe to it. But that's just me talking out my ass. As I mentioned earlier, I think the liminal horror in this movie is its greatest strength. It invokes an odd feeling, like you've landed at an empty airport really late at night, or maybe you've walked out of a movie theater to an also empty parking lot. People pass through these areas very frequently, but rarely does anybody stay for an extended time. You know that you shouldn't be in this area for very long, so you're compelled to just book it out of there. But there's something very mysterious and very compelling about this place that maybe makes you want to stay to see whatever's lurking in the shadows. But Backrooms takes this feeling a step further and places the characters into a completely confined environment. There's that feeling of being trapped in this nauseatingly yellow space that's fully and brightly lit at all times. The hallways are never ending and they lead to more hallways with nonsensical rooms that have objects which don't make any sense to be there. That's where the whole uncanny valley feeling starts to come into play. These rooms have zero function or purpose, and they have objects that are scattered about for no reason at all. It's like we've stepped out of reality, but it's like we haven't quite transcended into the metaphysical. We are still firmly in the material world, but we're now in a transitional space between reality and something greater than reality. Our surroundings have stopped making sense, but they are all still physically present. You can move the items, you can touch them, you can bring them in and out of the backrooms. We aren't quite in a dream state because everything is real, and that means the sense of danger is equally real. It feels like there's a bit of a disconnect in how the backrooms as a physical space are utilized in the first and second acts of the story. For the first two acts of the film, the backrooms feel like a character. It's a source of dread, danger, and it functions like an antagonist. I'll take this moment to talk about the set design because this is really what brings the story to life. A setting on its own can be menacing and foreboding. Think the desert or the open expanse of space or the ocean. But it takes a lot to turn what's essentially a mess of ugly wallpaper and misplaced objects into something outright hostile. The fact that this is an actual physical set that exists somewhere out there in the world is mind-boggling to me. This was also my first real big screen found footage experience, even though it's only a portion of the film, and I did absolutely adore it. It's like an exploration of pure dread where you know something bad should be happening soon. You're half excited to witness the big payoff and half nervous about getting caught off guard, but all the while you're experiencing the hair-raising tension that comes from just taking in the atmosphere and knowing that everything in this situation feels wrong. I think the found footage element really enhances the feeling of being trapped alongside the characters, where they're not just exploring a new mysterious environment, they are really just stuck inside there. It's almost as if the backrooms are shifting alongside them to get them cornered and vulnerable. I don't mean it's actually like changing or evolving in real time, but it feels that way with the constant ramping of intensity. But again, this film started losing me when the backrooms started feeling less like an antagonistic force and more like set dressing to explore the themes of past trauma and the need to move on with life. I think this is a very compelling approach to the backrooms concept, but my criticisms lie in how it's executed. I would have preferred to see the liminal horror and thematic elements indulged simultaneously. Once we start bringing in the entity and hammering home the backrooms as an allegory for the subconscious, it's like we start stripping away the horror of the unknown for a more straightforward take on confronting the past. So those are my no to light spoiler thoughts. I'm going to be going into my personal reading of the film and some mild and more blatant spoilers. As I just stated, Parsons uses the backrooms to explore trauma. Our main characters are an alcoholic furniture store owner and his therapist, and she carries plenty of her own childhood trauma and motivations for becoming a therapist. They're both seemingly lonely, isolated people, one more stable than the other, but both seem to be missing something in life. And when people feel like they're missing something, the natural inclination is to look inwards. Enter the backrooms. It's extremely easy to enter, as easy as no clipping through a wall, and it's equally easy to wander around aimlessly until you're completely and hopelessly lost. Clark, the furniture store owner, is the first to sink deep into the backrooms. After witnessing the death of his employees, he willingly resigns himself to his fate because the backrooms are, in some capacity, a reflection of his own mind. Many of these seemingly nonsensical items are simply scattered fragments of the past. When he captures Mary, his therapist, he decides to fully recreate the pivotal event that sent him into a downward spiral. It's a full recreation of a house dinner scene. The backrooms seem to recreate memories from the past, and like actual memories, the more you linger on them, the more you think about them, the more they get twisted and misremembered. Clark is unable to confront the past or grow as a person, and so his fate is that of self-destruction. The entity is simply a twisted image of himself. He's eaten alive by his own mind. Then we shift our full focus to Mary, who manages to escape the backrooms by confronting her past. She carries around that little slab of concrete as a memento from her childhood, and she shatters this same piece of concrete during her encounter with the entity. So that's my analysis out of the way. While these ideas are fun to think about and explore, the heavy-handed scenes of exposition and the harsh impromptu therapy session didn't grip me in the same way that many parts of the second act did. In particular, the whole climactic chase sequence was lacking the tension of earlier moments. It felt like we were going through the motions after having the big monster reveal, something to keep us grounded before giving the big plot twist ending, which I was admittedly very intrigued by. I normally dislike big sci-fi plot reveals. There's a horror game called House of Ashes that comes to mind, where the antagonistic force are demonic ancient vampires from Mesopotamian mythology. But the big final reveal comes and, spoiler alert, they're just aliens. Something a bit closer to the Backrooms concept is an analog horror web series called The Tangi Virus. Infection horror is something I find deeply compelling because it brings a sense of realism to stories about zombies and body horror. But again, the reveal is aliens, supercomputers, puppet governments. It just loses me. Backrooms, on the other hand, I really do appreciate how the ending was handled, because it does recapture the sense of mystery I thought was lacking in the third act. Even though it does feel like a setup for sequels, it did leave me wondering, what the hell is going on here? And I think this is an excellent way to tie in the smaller scale, introspective liminal horror with the grander concepts of conspiracy and secret agencies. They're rooted in the horror of exploring the unknown. That final sequence is where Renata Reinsve is really able to shine. She conveys so much with just facial acting in a more quiet, subdued environment. You're given the sense that she is now a changed person, and while she has no idea what the hell comes next, she's willing to move forward. But again, it's not enough to change my mind on the rest of the third act. I was honestly a little bored by the chase sequence to the point where I started zoning out during the couch moment, then boom, broken leg, because you need something to increase the tension in that moment. And I do have conflicting feelings with the entity design. On one hand, it does tap into the uncanny valley feeling of the misplaced furniture and empty pools earlier in the film. It works as just a figure ominously looming in front of the characters. You know something's absolutely wrong with it, but you're not sure what it's going to do. But then we use the entity to carry out the more overtly dangerous horror in the story, the bites and the chase sequences. At that point, it feels less uncanny and more goofy to me. I could see that clash in tone working for some people, but for me it just doesn't come together. And another complaint I have is that the script does feel a little awkward at times. The dinner table therapy scene is what comes to mind first. I initially felt like Renata Reinsve's performance was a little off, but thinking back on it, I do think she was trying to work with what she had. Mary starts cursing out Clark like we're leading up to some major emotional unraveling, but she ends up just lightly telling him off by brushing up on his trauma. I think she needed a little more bite, something to really dig into his psyche and tear down his ego, something that would logically push Clark to his breaking point and complete his path of self-destruction. I think Reinsve's performance felt a little stilted in this moment because she was compensating for the script's lack of energy with a more cold, jaded intensity. And again, while the dialogue doesn't fully work for me, I think she conveys it well enough with just her facial acting and her tone of voice. On that note, I'd say that Chiwetel Ejiofor was excellent throughout the whole movie. He really sunk into the role and made Clark feel like a fully realized character. I would have preferred a story where the characters were a little more obscured and gradually unveiled through their exploration of the backrooms, rather than using the more overt style of reveal the conflict in the exposition, then jump straight into resolving it. A very different film that tackles this idea is Surat. I'm referencing this because it is one of my favorite films. It's not a horror story, but it is very disturbing. It's a story where the setting also feels like a constant hostile force that bends each character to its will. We know next to nothing about its characters, but they're all hurt and sensitive people, looking for a way to press on with life. My feelings on Backrooms are generally positive, even if it might not sound that way. If I see a film that starts off rough, but gradually pulls me in, I'm gonna leave pleasantly surprised. If I see a film where I'm fully immersed and captivated for the first hour, but gradually start losing interest, I'm more inclined to feel a bit disappointed, even if those two experiences would pull the same score for me. I would recommend this movie if liminal horror is something that appeals to you, but otherwise I would pass. This could be a very frustrating or even boring watch from start to finish if you're not into that slow burn horror. If I had to give it a score, I'd give it somewhere between a 6.5 and a 7. There are a lot of things I really adored, but there were a few moments where I was disappointed with the story. However, I think this is an extremely impressive debut for a 20-year-old. It's a little baffling that a guy 1 year older than me made A24's biggest hit of all time. Anyways, I'm looking forward to seeing whatever Kane Parsons does next, and I might check out his web series. If he puts a Targaryen in an end-apartheid crop top just to kill him off again, I'm going to be very upset. So yeah, drop a comment to let me know your thoughts and opinions. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you watch the web series? Did you play the Roblox games? Remember to like and hit the sub and the bell button so you can be the first to see my review of Leviticus when it comes out in a few weeks. Until then, I'll probably just post more League videos. I'll see you guys later.